The sun-dappled shadows of autumn danced across Jessie Porter's face as she reined her mare to a stop on the ridge overlooking Genoa, Nevada territory. The year was 1869, and the mining town nestled in the Carson Valley seemed to shimmer like a mirage in the late afternoon light. 3 months of travel from Philadelphia had left her weary but determined, clutching the crumpled letter from her late father's attorney that promised a small inheritance, a struggling trading post on the edge of town. "Almost there, Maple," she murmured to her chestnut mare, adjusting her dusty riding skirt. At 24, Jessie had left behind the remnants of her old life. A failed engagement, the whispers that followed a woman who had publicly rejected one of Philadelphia's most eligible bachelors, and the stifling expectations of proper society. Her father's unexpected death had provided the excuse she needed to flee. The trading post had been her father's investment, purchased sight unseen during a business trip west years ago. According to the letter, he'd employed a local man to manage it, someone named York Vance. Jessie had written ahead to announce her arrival, but received no reply. She hoped Mr. Vance would be amenable to her taking over the business, or at the very least, buying him out. Jessie nudged Maple forward, following the winding trail down toward Genoa. The town was smaller than she'd imagined, a collection of wooden buildings, some with false fronts proclaiming their importance, others weathered and humble. A church steeple rose above the trees, and the distant sound of a piano drifted up from what she assumed must be a saloon. She passed several homesteads on her approach, noting the neat gardens and smoke rising from chimneys. On the outskirts of town, she spotted a large oak tree standing solitary on a small hill. Beneath its sprawling branches, a figure knelt in the dirt. As Jessie drew closer, she could make out a man digging with focused intensity, a pile of fresh earth beside him. Curiosity drew her off the main trail. The man hadn't noticed her approach, so absorbed was he in his task. Now that she was closer, Jessie could see that he was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a worn leather vest over a cotton shirt, the sleeves rolled up to expose sun-bronzed forearms. His hat lay on the ground beside him, revealing hair the color of wheat touched by sunset. Only when she was nearly upon him did Jessie realize what lay wrapped in a blanket beside the half-dug hole: a large dog, its brindled fur still and lifeless. The man's shoulders shook slightly, and Jessie hesitated, suddenly feeling like an intruder on a private moment of grief. Her mare huffed softly, and the man's head jerked up, hand instinctively reaching for the revolver holstered at his hip. His eyes, startlingly blue beneath dust-streaked brows, widened in surprise. "I'm sorry," Jessie said quickly. "I didn't mean to disturb you." The man slowly lowered his hand, studying her with a wariness that made her uncomfortably aware of how far she was from civilization. "Not expecting visitors out this way, madam. I was heading into town and saw you." She gestured awkwardly toward the blanket-wrapped form. "I'm sorry about your dog." Something in his expression shifted, the hard lines softening just slightly. He stood, revealing his full height at least 6 feet, Jessie guessed, and brushed dirt from his hands. "Been with me 12 years, he said, his voice low and rough-edged. "Best companion a man could ask for." Jessie dismounted, feeling drawn to the sorrow in his voice. "May I ask his name, Ranger?" The man's mouth quirked in a half-smile. "Named him that because he always ranged ahead, checking the trail, never failed to warn me of trouble." He looked down at the blanket-wrapped form, and his voice dropped to a near whisper. "He'll still guard us from heaven." The simple statement, spoken with such raw sincerity, caught Jessie by surprise. She felt her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. "That's a beautiful thought." The man looked at her again, as if truly seeing her for the first time. "You're not from around here." "No, Philadelphia. I'm Jessie Porter." She extended her hand, the way her father had taught her to do in business matters, regardless of what society thought proper for a lady. After a moment's hesitation, the man took her hand. His palm was calloused and warm. "York Vance." Jessie's breath caught. York Vance, the manager of Porter's trading post. Now it was his turn to look surprised. "You're William Porter's daughter?" "Yes, I sent a letter, never got it." He released her hand and studied her with new intensity. "Your father's been dead 8 months. Why come now?" The bluntness of his question caught her off guard. "I only learned of his ownership of the trading post recently." His attorney in Philadelphia wasn't aware of all his holdings until the estate was settled. York nodded slowly, though skepticism still shadowed his features. "Well, Miss Porter, you've come a long way to see a struggling business." "It was more than that," she admitted. "I needed a change." She glanced at the half-dug grave. "But I've interrupted your task. Please continue. I can wait." York hesitated, then picked up his shovel. "If you don't mind waiting, I'd rather finish this now. Ranger deserves a proper burial." Jessie nodded and led Maple to a patch of grass nearby. She watched as York returned to his digging, his movements efficient despite the emotion evident in his taut shoulders. The hole he dug was deeper than she might have expected for a dog, but it spoke of his respect for his companion. When he deemed the grave sufficient, York carefully lifted the blanket-wrapped bundle. Jessie was struck by the gentleness in his hands as he placed Ranger in the ground. Before covering him, York removed something from the blanket, a worn leather collar with a silver tag. "Keeping this to remember him," he explained, though Jessie hadn't asked. He tucked the collar into his vest pocket, then began filling in the grave. Jessie remained silent, honoring the moment. When York had tamped down the last of the earth, he collected several flat stones from nearby and arranged them over the grave. "To keep the coyotes away," he explained, "though they wouldn't dare if they knew who was buried here." He picked up his hat and settled it on his head. "I reckon you'll be wanting to see the trading post." "If it's not too much trouble," Jessie replied. "I've come a long way." York nodded. "It's just beyond those trees, my cabin's behind it." He whistled softly, and Jessie was startled to see a dappled gray horse emerge from the trees, no saddle or bridle in sight. "That's Smoke," York said, noticing her surprise. "No need for tack. We understand each other." The horse approached and allowed York to swing onto his back. Jessie mounted Maple, and they rode in silence toward town. As they passed the grave beneath the oak tree, York touched the brim of his hat in a silent farewell that brought unexpected tears to Jessie's eyes. The trading post was larger than she'd imagined, a solid log structure with a wide porch. A hand-painted sign reading Porter's Trading Post hung above the door, the wood weathered but the lettering still clear. "It's not much," York said as they dismounted, "but it serves the community. Miners, ranchers, travelers heading to California all need supplies." "My father never mentioned it," Jessie said, looking up at the sign bearing her family name. "I wonder why he kept it a secret." York's expression remained neutral. "Some men keep parts of themselves separate. Maybe this was your father's piece of freedom." The insight surprised her. "You sound like you knew him well. Met him a few times when he came through, enough to take him up on his offer to run this place 5 years ago." York pulled a ring of keys from his pocket and unlocked the door. "Come in. You must be tired after your journey." The interior was dimly lit until York opened the shutters, allowing late afternoon sunlight to filter in. Jessie looked around in wonder at the well-organized shelves stocked with everything from tools to fabric, dried goods to ammunition. A pot-bellied stove stood in one corner, and behind a long counter at the back was a small office area. "This is impressive," she said honestly. York shrugged. Business is steady, nothing fancy, but we turn a profit. We, figure of speech. Something crossed his face, a shadow of grief, and Jessie realized that Ranger had probably been his constant companion in this place too. She moved toward the counter, noticing the careful ledgers stacked on the small desk behind it. You keep good records. Your father insisted on it. Said a business lives or dies by its books. York leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. So what are your plans, Miss Porter? Selling the place? The question was direct, but Jessie heard a note of concern beneath it. Actually, I had thought to run it myself. York's eyebrows rose. Have you run a business before? I kept my father's books in Philadelphia. He owned a shipping company. She lifted her chin. I'm not helpless, Mr. Vance. A glimmer of respect appeared in his eyes. Never suggested you were, but this isn't Philadelphia. The territory has its own rules. Then I'll need someone who knows them, Jessie replied. Someone like you, perhaps. I'd be willing to offer you a partnership rather than just employment. York studied her for a long moment. That's mighty generous considering we just met. My father trusted you with his business for 5 years. That speaks volumes. Jessie met his gaze steadily. Besides, I'm practical enough to know I can't manage alone. Not at first. Before York could respond, the door opened and a woman entered. She was perhaps 50, with silver-streaked dark hair pulled into a practical bun and keen eyes that took in the scene at a glance. York Vance. Martha Reynolds is about to have her baby and Doc Sullivan's still out at the Harrison place. The woman's gaze shifted to Jessie. Who's this? Clara, meet Jessie Porter, William Porter's daughter and the new owner of this establishment. York gestured between them. Miss Porter, this is Clara Whitman, our local midwife and the closest thing Genoa has to a second doctor. Clara's eyes widened. Porter's daughter. Well, isn't that something? She offered a nod to Jessie before turning back to York. I need those medical supplies you've been holding for the doc. York moved swiftly to a cabinet behind the counter, unlocking it and retrieving a wooden box. Just came in last week. Tell Martha to hang on, Doc should be back by nightfall. Baby's coming whether the doc's here or not, Clara said grimly, taking the box. She gave Jessie another appraising look. Welcome to Genoa, Miss Porter. Hope you're tougher than you look. With that, she was gone, leaving Jessie slightly bewildered by the whirlwind encounter. Clara means well, York said, a hint of amusement in his voice. She just doesn't waste words or time. I can see that, Jessie replied. Is there somewhere in town I can stay tonight? I'd like to look over the books and discuss our potential arrangement further. York hesitated. There's the Genoa house, but it's more saloon than hotel, not really suitable for a lady traveling alone. He cleared his throat. There's a room above the store. Your father used it when he visited. It's simple but clean. Jessie considered her options. Staying above the store made practical sense, even if it might raise eyebrows. That would be fine, thank you. York nodded and moved toward a narrow staircase at the back of the store. I'll show you up. Then I need to check on a few things and close up for the day. We usually open at 7 and close at sunset. The room above the store was indeed simple: a bed, a washstand, a small table and chair, and a trunk for storage. But the windows faced west, offering a view of the mountains beyond Genoa, now turning golden in the setting sun. It's perfect, Jessie said, meaning it. After months of travel, even this sparse room felt like luxury. Pumps out back for water, York explained. Outhouse too. I'll bring you up some hot water for washing once I've tended to the horses. Thank you, Mr. Vance. York paused at the door. Most folks just call me York. Then I hope you'll call me Jessie, she replied. A brief smile touched his lips, transforming his weathered face. Jessie it is. He touched the brim of his hat. Welcome to Genoa. After he left, Jessie sank onto the edge of the bed, suddenly overwhelmed by the reality of her situation. She had traveled across the country to a town she'd never seen, to claim a business she hadn't known existed until a few months ago. And now she was proposing a partnership with a man she'd just met, a man who had been burying his dog when she found him. "What am I doing?" she whispered to the empty room. But as she looked out at the mountains catching the last light of day, something settled in her chest, a certainty that, despite the strangeness of it all, she was exactly where she needed to be. The next morning, Jessie woke before dawn, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. As reality returned, she rose and dressed quickly in one of her simpler dresses, a blue calico with a practical cut that would allow her to move freely. She brushed and pinned her dark hair, wishing she had time for a proper bath, but settling for washing her face and hands with the water York had brought up the previous evening. By the time she descended the stairs, the store was already illuminated with lantern light, and York was moving about, preparing to open for the day. He looked up as she reached the bottom step, surprise flickering across his features. "You're up early," he commented, setting a crate of goods on the counter. "I thought I might observe the daily operations," Jessie replied. "If I'm to be involved in running this place, I should understand how it works." York nodded approvingly. "There's coffee on the stove in the back room. Not as fancy as you might be used to, but it'll keep you awake." Jessie followed his direction to a small room behind the main store area, where she found not only a pot of coffee but some freshly baked biscuits. She returned with 2 cups of coffee, offering one to York. "Thank you," he said, taking the cup. "Clara brought the biscuits. News travels fast in Genoa. Half the town probably knows you're here by now. And what will they think of a woman running a trading post?" York took a sip of his coffee before answering. "They'll be curious at first. Judgmental, maybe. But out here, folks tend to care more about results than conventions. Run the place well, treat people fairly, and they'll come around." Jessie appreciated his honesty. "And have you decided about my partnership offer?" "Still considering it," he replied. "Let's see how today goes. Speaking of which," he moved to unlock the front door, turning the sign to open. The day passed in a blur of activity. Jessie observed as York handled a steady stream of customers, miners purchasing supplies, ranchers trading for goods they couldn't produce themselves, townspeople coming in for everyday necessities. York seemed to know everyone by name and often asked after family members or livestock with genuine interest. What impressed Jessie most was his fairness. When a young Mexican woman came in with a basket of intricately woven textiles, York offered her a price that seemed generous. Later, when a weather-beaten prospector brought in a small pouch of gold dust, York weighed it carefully and paid him what Jessie calculated was the full market value. "You could have offered him less," she commented after the prospector left. "He might not have known the difference." York's expression hardened slightly. "That's not how I do business. Man works hard enough panning in icy streams all day. He deserves every cent." Jessie felt properly chastised. "I didn't mean to suggest. I'm just surprised." In Philadelphia, business often seems to be about maximizing profit at every turn. York's face softened. "Out here, your reputation is everything. Besides, old Jim there has been coming to this post for years. Loyalty goes both ways." As the day progressed, Jessie began helping, first just fetching items from shelves, then gradually assisting customers directly. By mid-afternoon, she had even handled a few transactions on her own, feeling a growing confidence in her ability to run the store. During a lull, York showed her the ledgers, explaining his system for tracking inventory and accounts. Jessie was impressed by his organization and attention to detail. "You're good at this," she said, genuinely admiring his business acumen. York shrugged. Had to be. Your father expected regular reports. He hesitated. Speaking of which, there's something you should know. Your father wasn't just an absentee owner. He used this place for other purposes too. Jessie looked up sharply. What do you mean? York glanced toward the door to ensure they were alone. The trading post was a stop on a route helping former slaves reach California. Your father funded it. I helped coordinate. Jessie stared at him in disbelief. My father was involved in the Underground Railroad, but slavery ended years ago with the war. The war ended legal slavery, York corrected her quietly. But there are still people held against their will, especially in remote areas. And there are those who face persecution or worse because of the color of their skin, even now. Your father believed everyone deserved freedom and a fair chance. Jessie sat back, trying to reconcile this information with the stern, proper businessman she had known. He never said a word. He was protecting you, York said, and the operation. The fewer people who knew, the safer everyone was. He met her gaze directly. If you decide to stay, you should know this work continues. If that's something you can't abide, we should discuss alternatives for the business. Jessie felt a strange mix of emotions: shock at this revelation about her father, admiration for his secret work, and a new respect for York's forthrightness. I need time to process this, she said honestly, but I can tell you that I have no objection to helping people in need. Relief visibly crossed York's features. That's good to hear. Your father would be proud. The rest of the day passed without further revelations. As dusk approached, York began the closing procedures while Jessie organized some newly arrived fabric that had been delivered that afternoon. I'm heading back to my cabin for the night, York said once they had locked up. Will you be comfortable here alone? Yes, I think so, Jessie replied, though the thought of the empty building at night was slightly unnerving. York seemed to read her hesitation. I could stay in the storeroom if you'd feel safer. That's not necessary, she assured him quickly. I'm just adjusting to new surroundings. York nodded. I'll come by early tomorrow. We should talk about your partnership idea. I've been thinking about it. You have? Jessie couldn't keep the eagerness from her voice. A small smile touched his lips. It has merit, but there are details to discuss. He touched his hat. Good night, Jessie. Good night, York. After he left, Jessie secured all the doors and windows before climbing the stairs to her room. The events of the day swirled in her mind: the business, the customers, the revelation about her father's secret activities. And beneath it all, her growing curiosity about York Vance, the taciturn cowboy who had shown such tenderness while burying his dog, and such integrity in running her father's business. She stood at the window, looking out at the darkening town of Genoa. For the first time since leaving Philadelphia, she felt a sense of possibility, as if the path before her, though uncertain, held promise. York arrived at the trading post just after dawn the next morning, carrying a basket covered with a cloth. Jessie, who had risen early again and was already dressed, opened the door at his knock. Thought you might appreciate some breakfast, he said, lifting the basket. Mrs. Hendricks at the boarding house makes the best flapjacks in the territory. The thoughtful gesture touched Jessie. That's very kind. Please come in. They ate at the small table in the back room, the flapjacks indeed delicious with the honey York had brought along. As they finished, York broached the subject they'd left hanging the night before. About this partnership, he began. I've given it some thought and I'm willing to try it with conditions. I'm listening, Jessie said, setting down her cup. First, we split everything 50-50, profits, decisions, responsibilities. Second, we give it 6 months. If either of us is unhappy, we revisit the arrangement. Third, we're honest with each other always. He held her gaze steadily. Those are my terms. Jessie considered them carefully. They seem fair except for one thing. The trading post legally belongs to me now. A true 50-50 split would require you to buy half. York nodded. I've been saving. I can pay you a fair price for half over the next year. Or, Jessie countered, you could contribute your expertise and local knowledge as your investment. That has considerable value. York looked surprised. You'd consider that equivalent to financial investment. In this situation, yes. Your knowledge is worth more to me than money. She extended her hand across the table. Partners, after a moment's hesitation, York clasped her hand firmly. Partners. The handshake sealed more than a business arrangement. It marked the beginning of a new chapter for both of them. As they opened the store and began the day's work, Jessie felt a growing comfort in their shared purpose. Over the next few weeks, they fell into a routine. York continued to handle most customer interactions, while Jessie took over the bookkeeping and inventory management. She introduced some innovations from her father's shipping business, a more detailed tracking system for credit accounts, and a catalog system for special orders. York was skeptical at first, but came to appreciate her business acumen. Never thought I'd say this, he admitted one evening as they reviewed the day's receipts, but your fancy Philadelphia methods are actually improving our profits. Jessie laughed. And I never thought I'd be haggling with miners over the price of pickaxes. We're both learning. Their friendship grew alongside their business partnership. Jessie found herself looking forward to the quiet evenings when they would sit in the back room, reviewing the day's business, and sometimes sharing stories of their lives. York spoke little of his past, but Jessie gathered he had been a ranch hand, a trail guide, and briefly a deputy before settling in Genoa to run the trading post. One rainy afternoon, when business was slow, York surprised her by asking about her life in Philadelphia. You mentioned a change. What were you changing from? Jessie hesitated, then decided honesty was part of their agreement. I was engaged to be married. A suitable match, according to my mother, the son of one of my father's business associates. But 3 months before the wedding, I discovered he was involved with another woman. When I confronted him, he told me I should look the other way, as all proper wives eventually learn to do. York's expression darkened. Sounds like a real gentleman. I broke the engagement publicly, Jessie continued. It caused quite the scandal. My mother was mortified. After my father died, there seemed no reason to stay. And now, do you regret leaving? Jessie considered the question seriously. No, I miss certain comforts and some friends, but here, I feel useful, necessary even. In Philadelphia, I was decorative, expected to be pretty, pleasant, and undemanding. York studied her for a moment. You're more than decorative, Jessie Porter. This place runs better with you in it. The simple compliment meant more to her than all the flowery praise she'd received in Philadelphia. Thank you, York. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Clara Whitman, soaked from the rain and carrying a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. Thought you might want these back, she said, unwrapping what turned out to be medical texts. Been studying them since the birth at the Reynolds place. York took the books and placed them carefully on a shelf behind the counter. Any word from Doc Sullivan about when he'll return from Carson City? Another week at least, Clara replied with a sigh. Conference of medical men, he says. Meanwhile, I'm tending to everything from fevers to broken bones. Jessie admired the older woman's competence and no-nonsense attitude. It's impressive that you manage without formal training. Clara gave her an appraising look. When necessity calls, we answer with what we have. Speaking of which, York, I'm running low on willow bark and those digestive powders. As York helped Clara with her supplies, Jessie reflected on the midwife's words. Necessity calls, and we answer with what we have. It seemed an apt description of life in Genoa and perhaps of her own journey to this place. Later that week, York suggested they close the store early. "I want to show you something," he said mysteriously, curious. Jessie agreed. They locked up and York led her to where Smoke was waiting patiently. Maple was stabled behind the trading post and Jessie quickly saddled her. They rode out of town, following a trail that wound up into the foothills. The late afternoon sun bathed the landscape in golden light, illuminating the autumn colors that painted the scattered trees. "Where are we going?" Jessie asked, but York just smiled and urged Smoke forward. After about an hour's ride, they crested a rise and Jessie gasped at the view that spread before them. Carson Valley lay below, a patchwork of fields and ranches, with Genoa, a small cluster of buildings in the distance. Beyond, the Sierra Nevada mountains rose majestically, their peaks already dusted with early snow. "It's breathtaking," she whispered. York dismounted and helped Jessie down from her horse. "Thought you should see what this country really looks like. The store is just a small part of it." They stood side by side, taking in the panorama. "I found Ranger up here," York said after a while, his voice softer than usual. "He was half wild, probably abandoned by travelers. Took me 3 days of leaving food before he'd let me get close enough to touch him." Jessie glanced at York, noticing the way he unconsciously touched the pocket where she knew he kept Ranger's collar. "You must miss him terribly." "Every day," York admitted. 12 years is a long time to have someone at your side." "What happened to him?" Jessie asked gently. York's face tightened. "Snake bite. 2 days before you arrived, I tried everything poultices, whiskey, even rode to find the doctor, but he was too far out. Ranger was old. His body couldn't fight it." He swallowed hard. "He died in my arms the morning you found me." Without thinking, Jessie placed her hand on York's arm. "I'm so sorry." York looked down at her hand, then covered it with his own. "Thank you for waiting while I buried him. Most folks would have thought it foolish to make such a fuss over a dog." "He wasn't just a dog," Jessie said. "He was family." Something shifted in York's eyes, a softening, a vulnerability he rarely showed. For a moment, Jessie thought he might say more, but instead, he gently released her hand and turned back to the view. They stayed until the sun began to set, turning the sky into a canvas of orange, pink, and purple. As they rode back to Genoa in the gathering dusk, Jessie felt a warmth inside that had nothing to do with the day's exertion and everything to do with the man riding beside her. The next morning, Jessie was awakened by urgent knocking at the store's front door. She hurriedly dressed and rushed downstairs to find York already there, speaking in low tones with a tall man she didn't recognize. "What's happening?" she asked, noting the tension in York's stance. York turned, his expression grave. "Jessie, this is Marcus Bell. He brings news we need to discuss." Marcus nodded respectfully to Jessie. "Miss Porter, sorry to disturb you so early." York closed and locked the door behind Marcus. "We need to use the back room." Once they were seated around the small table, York explained. "Marcus is part of the network your father helped establish. He's brought word that a family needs assistance, a mother, father, and 2 children. They've escaped from a mining operation in southern Nevada where they were being held in debt peonage." Jessie looked at Marcus questioningly. "Debt peonage? It's a way around the slavery laws," Marcus explained, his voice tinged with bitterness. "Company loans money to workers, often immigrants or freed slaves, then charges so much for food, tools, and housing that they can never pay it off. Anyone who tries to leave is hunted down for stealing company property." "That's barbaric," Jessie said, horrified. Marcus nodded grimly. "This family managed to slip away during a shift change. They're hiding with a sympathetic rancher about 15 miles south, but they can't stay there long. The company has hired men searching for them. York leaned forward, elbows on the table. When do they need to move? Tomorrow night, Marcus replied. The plan is to get them to the Washoe tribe settlement north of here. They have people who can guide them safely to California after that. York nodded. I'll prepare the wagon. He glanced at Jessie. This is dangerous work. If you'd rather not be involved, I want to help, Jessie interrupted firmly. What can I do? A look of respect crossed Marcus's face. Just like your father said you'd be. Jessie blinked in surprise. My father spoke of me to you. Said if anything happened to him, you'd carry on his work if you knew about it. Marcus stood. I need to get back. York knows the meeting place. Be there after midnight tomorrow. With that, he slipped out the back door and was gone. York studied Jessie's face. You're sure about this? If we're caught, it could mean prison, or worse. I've never been more sure of anything, Jessie replied, her heart racing with a mixture of fear and determination. These people need help. We can provide it. York's expression softened. Your father would be proud. The next day passed with an undercurrent of tension beneath their normal business activities. York was quieter than usual, his mind clearly on the night ahead. When they closed the store, he instructed Jessie to rest while he prepared the wagon. We'll leave around 11, he said. Wear dark clothes and bring a blanket. The nights are getting colder. Jessie tried to sleep, but found herself too anxious about their mission. Instead, she wrote in her journal, documenting the unexpected turn her life had taken since arriving in Genoa. If something happened to her, she wanted there to be a record of why she had chosen this path. Just before 11, she dressed in her darkest skirt and blouse, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders for warmth. When she descended the stairs, York was waiting, dressed in dark clothing with his revolver visible at his hip. Ready? He asked quietly. She nodded, and they slipped out the back door to where the wagon waited, already loaded with what appeared to be ordinary trading goods. Supplies are hidden under the flour sacks, York explained as he helped her onto the seat. Food, blankets, some money to help them get established in California. They traveled in silence, taking back roads away from town. The night was clear, stars sprinkled across the sky like diamond dust. Under different circumstances, it might have been a pleasant evening ride. About an hour later, York turned the wagon onto an almost invisible trail that wound through a stand of cottonwoods. They emerged into a small clearing where a lone figure waited beside a tethered horse. Marcus. York called softly. The figure approached. Right on time. They're ready. From the shadows emerged 4 people, a man and woman, both thin and weary-looking, and 2 children who couldn't have been more than 8 and 10 years old. They moved cautiously, eyes darting nervously as if expecting danger from every direction. York jumped down from the wagon and spoke quietly to the father, while Jessie went to the mother and children. I'm Jessie, she said, keeping her voice low and gentle. We're going to help you get somewhere safe. The woman nodded, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and hope. I'm Adeline. These are my children, Sarah and Thomas. York helped the family into the back of the wagon, showing them how to hide among the supplies if necessary. Marcus gave York final instructions about the meeting point with the Washoe guides, then disappeared back into the night. As they prepared to leave, they heard the distant sound of hoofbeats. York's head snapped up, his hand moving to his revolver. Someone's coming, he whispered. Get in the back with them, Jessie. She started to argue, but the urgency in his voice made her comply. York quickly covered them with canvas and sacks, then returned to the driver's seat. Jessie could hear her own heart pounding as she huddled with the family in the darkness of the wagon bed. The hoofbeats grew louder, then slowed. Through a small gap in the canvas, Jessie could see lantern light approaching. Evening, gentlemen, she heard York say, his voice casual but alert. Mighty late to be out driving, friend, came an unfamiliar voice. Where you headed? Delivery to the Jackson Ranch, York replied smoothly. They've got a barn raising tomorrow, needed extra supplies. There was a pause, and Jessie held her breath. Mind if we take a look in your wagon? The voice asked. It's just flour and nails, York said, his tone still friendly but with an edge now. But help yourself if you don't believe me. Jessie tensed, feeling Adeline's grip on her arm tighten. The children were remarkably silent, clearly understanding the danger. Footsteps approached the wagon, and Jessie saw lantern light illuminating the canvas above them. Then, to her relief, the footsteps retreated. Sorry to trouble you, the voice said, sounding less suspicious now. We're looking for some thieves who stole from the Silver Peak Mining Company. Family of 4, heading this direction. Haven't seen anyone on the road, York replied, but I'll keep an eye out and report to the sheriff if I do. The men wished York good night, and Jessie heard them riding away. Only when the sound had completely faded did York pull back the canvas. They're gone, but we need to move quickly. They might double back. The remainder of the journey was tense but uneventful. They reached the rendezvous point, a small cabin near a stream, just before dawn. 2 Washoe men were waiting, their faces impassive as York explained the situation. The older of the 2 nodded. We will take them from here. They will be safe. As the family prepared to leave with their new guides, Adeline approached Jessie. Thank you, she said simply, her eyes conveying what words could not. Jessie squeezed the woman's hand. Be safe. Build a good life. They watched as the family disappeared into the early morning mist with their guides. Only then did York turn to Jessie, his expression a mixture of relief and admiration. You did well tonight, he said. Not many would have kept their composure when those men came. I was terrified, Jessie admitted, but it was worth it to help them. York's gaze lingered on her face. You're something special, Jessie Porter. Your father knew it, and now I do too. The words warmed her more than they should have, given the circumstances. As they climbed back into the wagon for the return journey to Genoa, Jessie felt a deeper connection to York than ever before, a shared purpose that transcended their business partnership. The autumn days grew shorter, and business at the trading post thrived under Jessie and York's joint management. They worked well together, each complementing the other's strengths. York's knowledge of the community and their needs balanced with Jessie's head for figures and organization. As October turned to November, the first real snowfall dusted Genoa. Jessie stood at the window of the trading post, watching the flakes swirl in the wind. First snow always makes me think of Christmas, she said as York came to stand beside her. In Philadelphia, the shops would be decorating their windows by now. York studied her profile. Do you miss it? The city, I mean. Jessie considered the question carefully. I miss certain aspects, the libraries, the concerts, but not enough to go back. She turned to face him. I've found something here I never had there. And what's that? York asked, his voice softer than usual. Purpose, Jessie replied. Independence, the freedom to be useful rather than ornamental, she smiled. And good company. A pleased expression crossed York's face, quickly hidden as the door opened, bringing in a flurry of snow and a customer seeking warm gloves. That evening, as they prepared to close the store, Clara Whitman arrived, looking unusually concerned. There's a situation, she said without preamble. The Evans family out by the creek, their youngest has a fever that's not breaking. I've done what I can, but... She looked at York. They're asking for you. York's expression turned grave. Me? Why? The boy keeps asking for Ranger, says the dog will make him feel better. Clara's eyes softened with sympathy. I didn't have the heart to tell him. York was silent for a moment, then nodded. I'll go. He glanced at Jessie. This might take a while. I'll come with you, Jessie said immediately. I can help. Clara looked between them, a knowing expression crossing her face. I'll gather some more supplies and meet you there. After she left, York turned to Jessie. You don't have to come. It might be a long night and the Evans place is 5 miles out. All the more reason you shouldn't go alone, Jessie insisted. Besides, I know something about nursing fevers. My mother taught me. York studied her for a moment, then nodded. Thank you. They closed the store and prepared for the journey, packing extra blankets, food, and medicines. The snow was falling more heavily now, but York assured Jessie he knew the way blindfolded if necessary. The ride to the Evans farm was cold and challenging. By the time they arrived, darkness had fallen completely, and the only light came from the farmhouse windows, golden squares against the black night. Mrs. Evans met them at the door, her face drawn with worry. "Thank God you've come," she said, ushering them inside. "Tommy's asking for you, York." "And Ranger." York's jaw tightened at the mention of his dog, but he nodded and followed Mrs. Evans to a small bedroom where a boy of about 6 lay flushed with fever, his breathing labored. "Hey there, Tommy," York said, his voice gentler than Jessie had ever heard it. He knelt beside the bed. "I hear you're not feeling well." The boy's eyes fluttered open. "York," he whispered, "where's Ranger? I want to pet him." Jessie saw the pain flash across York's face. He reached into his pocket and pulled out Ranger's collar, placing it gently in the boy's hand. "Ranger can't be here in person," York said softly, "but he sent his collar to watch over you. He's guarding you from heaven now." Tommy's small fingers curled around the collar. "Really?" York nodded solemnly. "Really. He was the best guard dog ever. Now he's your special guardian angel." The simple explanation seemed to comfort the boy, who closed his eyes again, the collar clutched to his chest. Mrs. Evans wiped away a tear. "He loves that dog. Whenever you'd come by with supplies, Tommy would spend more time with Ranger than anyone else." "I didn't know," York said quietly. Jessie moved forward, placing a hand on Tommy's forehead. "He's very hot. When did the fever start?" "Yesterday morning," Mrs. Evans replied. "Clara gave him willow bark tea, but it's not helping much." Jessie nodded. "We need to cool him down. Do you have clean cloths and cool water?" For the next several hours, Jessie and Mrs. Evans worked to bring down Tommy's fever, while York sat beside the boy, talking softly about Ranger's adventures and keeping the other Evans children occupied with stories. Clara arrived with more medicines, and together they managed to coax some broth and fever-reducing powders into Tommy. By midnight, his breathing had eased somewhat, though the fever persisted. "You both should rest," Clara told Jessie and York. "I'll watch him for a few hours." Mrs. Evans showed them to the small parlor, where they could rest on the settee and chairs. York insisted Jessie take the settee while he made do with a straight-back chair. Despite her exhaustion, Jessie found it hard to sleep. She watched York, his face illuminated by the dying fire, his expression troubled even in repose. She realized how much she had come to care for this man, his integrity, his compassion, his quiet strength. Sometime before dawn, Jessie woke to the sound of movement. York was gone from his chair. She rose and followed the soft murmur of voices to Tommy's room, where she found York sitting beside the bed, talking quietly to the boy, whose eyes were open and clearer than before. "And then Ranger found the lost calf," York was saying. "Followed its scent through a thunderstorm, if you can believe it. Smartest dog in the territory." Tommy smiled weakly. "I wish I could have a dog like Ranger." York glanced up as Jessie entered, his eyes communicating silent good news. The fever had broken. "Maybe someday you will," York told Tommy. "When you're a bit stronger." Jessie approached the bed. "How are you feeling, Tommy?" "Better," the boy replied. "York says Ranger is watching over me from heaven." "I believe he is," Jessie said, smiling at York. Ranger was very special. As the sun rose, Tommy fell into a natural, healing sleep. Clara pronounced him out of danger, and the relief in the Evans household was palpable. Mrs. Evans insisted on feeding them a hearty breakfast before they departed. As they rode back toward Genoa, the morning sun turning the snow-covered landscape into a glittering wonderland, Jessie glanced at York. "What you did for Tommy. It was beautiful," she said, giving him Ranger's collar, telling him those stories. York's gaze remained on the trail ahead. "Wasn't planning to give away the collar, but when I saw his face..." He shrugged. "Seemed right. Ranger would have approved." "I'm sure he would have," Jessie agreed. "You know, I never asked how did you get the name York. It's unusual." A small smile touched his lips. "Born in New York. My mother thought it sounded distinguished. My father thought it was ridiculous, but he let her have her way." "I like it," Jessie said. "It suits you." York looked at her then, really looked at her, and Jessie felt something shift between them, a deepening of the connection that had been growing since the day she found him beneath the oak tree. "Thank you for coming with me last night," he said. "Having you there, it meant a lot." Jessie felt warmth spread through her chest despite the cold air. Partners, remember, in everything. The word everything hung between them, carrying more meaning than either was ready to acknowledge. But as they rode back to Genoa, side by side in the winter sunshine, Jessie knew that something had changed, something that couldn't be undone. As November drew to a close, preparations for Christmas began throughout Genoa. The trading post became busier than ever, with people purchasing special items for the holiday season. York and Jessie expanded their inventory to include small luxuries, ribbons, candies, and toys that might otherwise be unavailable in the remote town. One afternoon, as Jessie was arranging a display of colorful hair ribbons, the door opened, admitting a gust of cold air and a man she didn't recognize. Tall and expensively dressed, with a well-groomed beard and imperious manner, he stood just inside the doorway, scanning the store with a critical eye. York, who had been helping a customer select tools, straightened and moved toward the newcomer. "Can I help you, sir?" The man ignored York, his gaze fixing on Jessie. Jessica Porter," Jessie froze, recognition dawning. "Edward, what on earth are you doing here?" Edward Chamberlain, her former fiancé, smiled thinly. "I might ask you the same question. Your mother is beside herself with worry." York looked between them, his expression guarded. "You know this man, Jessie?" "Unfortunately, yes," Jessie replied, her voice cooler than the winter air outside. "Edward Chamberlain, my former fiancé. Edward, this is York Vance, my business partner." Edward barely glanced at York. "Business partner? Jessica, this is absurd. I've come to take you home." The few customers in the store were now watching with undisguised interest. Jessie lifted her chin. "I am home, Edward, and I have no intention of returning to Philadelphia with you." Edward's face hardened. "Your mother is ill. She needs you." Guilt flashed through Jessie, quickly followed by suspicion. "Is she truly ill, or is that just what she told you to convince you to fetch me?" A flicker of discomfort crossed Edward's face, confirming Jessie's suspicion. "She's concerned for your welfare, as am I. This is no place for a woman of your breeding." York stepped forward, his stance protective though he maintained a respectful distance. "Mr. Chamberlain, perhaps this conversation would be better continued in private." Edward finally deigned to look at York, his gaze dismissive. "And you are what, exactly?" "The hired help. He's my partner," Jessie repeated firmly. "In every sense that matters, and he's right, we should discuss this privately." She turned to York. "Could you manage the store for a while? I'll take Mr. Chamberlain to the Genoa house for a meal." York's eyes held a question, which Jessie answered with a slight nod of reassurance. "Of course," he said. Take all the time you need." Edward offered his arm, which Jessie pointedly ignored as she collected her shawl and led the way out of the trading post. They walked in tense silence to the Genoa house, where Jessie requested a private table in the corner of the dining room. Once they were seated with coffee before them, Jessie spoke. "Why are you really here, Edward? We ended our engagement nearly a year ago." Edward leaned forward, his voice low and earnest. "I made a mistake, Jessica. I never should have. Strayed. I've missed you terribly." Jessie raised an eyebrow. "Missed me? Or missed the connections my father's name provided for your business ventures?" A flash of anger crossed his face. "That's unfair. I genuinely care for you." "Not enough to be faithful," Jessie pointed out. "Not enough to respect me." Edward had the grace to look somewhat abashed. "I was foolish, but I've changed. And when your mother wrote that you'd run off to this wilderness, I knew I had to come for you." Jessie studied the man she had once thought she would marry. He was handsome, certainly, and charming when he wished to be. But she saw now what she had been blind to before: the calculation behind his smile, the sense of entitlement in his posture. "Edward, I didn't run off. I came to claim my inheritance and make a life for myself. I'm happy here." He looked around the modest dining room with barely disguised disdain. "Happy, in this backwater, living above a shop and consorting with cowboys." Jessie felt a surge of protective anger at his tone when referring to York. "Yes, happy. Happier than I ever was in Philadelphia, pretending to be someone I'm not for the sake of society's approval." Edward's expression softened into something that might have passed for genuine concern. "Jessica, be reasonable. This infatuation with independence, with this rustic lifestyle, it's a phase. Eventually, you'll tire of it, and when you do, what then? You'll have ruined your reputation, your prospects." Jessie shook her head, a small smile playing at her lips. "That's where you're wrong, Edward. I don't need prospects. I have a thriving business, friends who value me for who I am, not my family name and work that matters. What could Philadelphia offer that would compare?" "Civilization," Edward replied promptly. "Culture, comfort, your proper place in society." "My proper place," Jessie repeated thoughtfully. "That's what this is really about, isn't it? You and my mother believe I should know my place, and that place is wherever you decide it should be." Edward's silence confirmed her words. Jessie sighed and pushed her coffee cup away. "I'm not going back, Edward. Not now, not ever. Please tell my mother that I'm well and happy and that I'll write to her more regularly." She stood, signaling the end of their conversation. "I wish you a safe journey home." Edward rose as well, his expression hardening. "You're making a grave mistake, Jessica. This fantasy life you've created won't last, and when it falls apart, don't expect me to be waiting." Jessie met his gaze steadily. "I would never expect that of you, Edward. Goodbye." She walked out of the Genoa house with her head high, feeling lighter than she had in months. The confrontation with her past had clarified her feelings about her present and possibly her future. When she returned to the trading post, York was alone, restocking shelves with a focused intensity that suggested tension. "Everything all right?" he asked without looking up. "Yes," Jessie replied, removing her shawl. "Edward will be returning to Philadelphia, alone." York finally turned to face her. "He came to take you back." It wasn't a question, but Jessie answered anyway. "He did. Apparently, my mother convinced him I was having some sort of breakdown, running off to the wilderness as he called it." "And were you?" York asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Having a breakdown?" Jessie moved closer to him, wanting him to see the truth in her eyes. "No, I was finding myself. Finding where I truly belong." York's expression softened. "And where is that, Jessie Porter?" "Here," she said simply, "in Genoa, at the trading post." She took a deep breath. "With you if you'll have me. For a moment, York stood perfectly still, his eyes searching hers. Then, slowly, he reached out and took her hand. "I've wanted to hear you say that for months," he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "But I wasn't sure if you could ever see a future with someone like me." "Someone like you," Jessie echoed, squeezing his hand. "You mean someone honorable, kind, and brave. Someone who treats people fairly and stands up for what's right. Someone who comforts a sick child with stories about his dog guarding from heaven," she smiled. "Why wouldn't I want a future with someone like that?" York's other hand came up to cup her cheek. "I don't have much to offer, just this store, my cabin, and a life that's nothing like what you knew in Philadelphia." "You offer everything I need," Jessie said softly. "Everything I want." For a moment, they stood suspended in the quiet of the trading post, the winter sun slanting through the windows, illuminating dust motes that danced around them like tiny stars. Then York lowered his head and kissed her, a gentle, questioning kiss that quickly deepened into something more certain. When they finally pulled apart, York rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since I saw you on the ridge that first day," Jessie laughed softly. "Even when I interrupted you burying Ranger." "Even then," York confirmed, his arms encircling her waist. "You looked like an angel in the sunlight. I thought I was seeing things." The bell over the door jingled, and they stepped apart as Clara Whitman entered, her sharp eyes taking in their flushed faces and clasped hands. "Well, it's about time," she declared, setting her basket on the counter. "Whole town's been placing bets on when you two would come to your senses." York chuckled. "Is that so, and who won?" "I did," Clara replied smugly. "Knew it would happen before Christmas." She fixed them with a stern look. "Now, when's the wedding?" Jessie blinked in surprise, but York squeezed her hand reassuringly. "We haven't discussed that yet, Clara. Give us a moment to catch our breath." Clara waved a dismissive hand. "Don't wait too long. Life's short, especially out here." She began selecting items from her list. "By the way, I heard that fancy gentleman from back east left on the afternoon stage, looking mighty unhappy, according to Elijah at the station." "Good," York said simply, and Jessie couldn't help but smile at his directness. After Clara left, they closed the store early and walked together to the oak tree where Ranger was buried. The stones York had placed over the grave were now partially covered with snow, but he brushed them clear, his movements gentle and reverent. "I wanted to bring you here," he said, straightening. "To tell Ranger about us. Sounds foolish, I know." "It's not foolish at all," Jessie replied, linking her arm through his. "He was family to you. Of course you want to share important news with him." York looked down at her, his expression tender. "You understand me better than anyone ever has, Jessie Porter." "And you understand me," she replied. "That's why we make such good partners." As they stood beneath the oak tree, the setting sun casting long shadows across the snow, Jessie felt a sense of rightness, of coming home in a way that had nothing to do with buildings or geography, and everything to do with the man beside her. "Ranger would have approved of you," York said suddenly. "He was a good judge of character." "I wish I could have known him," Jessie said sincerely. York smiled, a hint of mischief in his eyes. "He would have tested you first. Probably stolen your bonnet or a glove, made you chase him to prove your determination." Jessie laughed, the sound bright in the winter stillness. "I would have passed his test." "Yes," York agreed, his arm tightening around her. "You would have." As December progressed, Jessie and York's relationship deepened alongside their business partnership. They were discreet in public, but the residents of Genoa were observant, and knowing smiles often greeted them as they worked together in the trading post. Edward's visit had unexpected benefits beyond clarifying Jessie's feelings for York. After receiving a strongly worded letter from Jessie, her mother had relented somewhat, sending a trunk of Jessie's belongings that she hadn't been able to bring on her journey west. Among them were books, some favorite clothing items, and family photographs that Jessie treasured. "She's coming around," Jessie told York as they unpacked the trunk together one evening after closing. She even addressed the letter to Miss Jessie Porter, proprietress, Porter's Trading Post, instead of just my name. York smiled at her obvious pleasure. "Sounds like progress." "It is." Jessie pulled out a small velvet pouch. "Oh, I didn't expect her to send this." Inside was a delicate gold locket that had belonged to her grandmother. Jessie opened it to reveal a tiny painted portrait of her father as a young man. "He looks like you," York observed, peering at the miniature. "Same determined expression." Jessie touched the portrait gently. "I wish he could have seen the Trading Post, seen what we're doing with it, and the other work helping people find freedom." York's arms slipped around her waist. "He knew you had it in you. That's why he told Marcus you'd carry on if you knew about the work." The Christmas season brought even more activity to the Trading Post. York and Jessie extended their hours to accommodate the increased business, often working from dawn until well after dusk. Despite the long hours, Jessie found joy in helping customers find the perfect gifts for loved ones, especially those who had little to spend but wanted to give something special. One evening, a week before Christmas, York surprised her by closing the store early. "Get your coat," he told her with an air of mystery. "I have something to show you." Curious, Jessie complied. They walked through the town, where evergreen boughs and red ribbons decorated the storefronts, toward York's cabin at the edge of Genoa. Jessie had visited the cabin before, a sturdy, well-built structure with 2 rooms and a stone fireplace. It was simply furnished but comfortable, reflecting York's practical nature. As they approached, Jessie noticed smoke rising from the chimney. "Is someone there?" she asked. York smiled. "No, just prepared ahead." He opened the door, revealing the cabin transformed. A small fir tree stood in one corner, decorated with strings of berries, pine cones, and a few simple ornaments. The fireplace blazed merrily, and the table was set for dinner with York's best dishes and what appeared to be a feast warming on the stove. "York," Jessie breathed, taking in the scene. "It's beautiful." "Did you do all this yourself?" He nodded, a hint of shyness in his expression. "Wanted our first Christmas to be special, even if it's a bit early." Jessie stepped into his arms, deeply touched by the effort he had made. "It's perfect." They enjoyed the meal. York had prepared venison stew, fresh bread from the bakery, and a bottle of wine that must have cost more than he could easily afford. Afterward, they sat before the fire, talking of the future and the past, their hopes and dreams intertwining. "I have something for you," York said eventually, reaching into his pocket. "An early Christmas gift." He handed her a small wooden box, beautifully carved with a pattern of oak leaves. Jessie opened it to find a ring nestled inside a simple gold band set with a small but perfect sapphire. "It was my mother's," York explained, his voice husky with emotion. "My father gave it to her when they decided to come west, said the blue reminded him of the Nevada sky where they'd make their new life together." Jessie looked up at him, her heart racing. "York?" He took her hands in his. "Jessie Porter, I never expected to find someone like you. Never thought I'd want to share my life with anyone after being on my own for so long. But from the moment you found me under that oak tree, something changed." He squeezed her hands gently. "I love you. Will you marry me?" Tears of happiness welled in Jessie's eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, with all my heart." York slipped the ring onto her finger where it fit as if it had been made for her. Then he pulled her into his arms, his kiss conveying everything words could not: the depth of his love, the promise of their future together. When they finally parted, Jessie rested her head against his chest, listening to the strong, steady beat of his heart. "When shall we marry?" she asked. York pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "Whenever you wish. Spring would be nice when the wildflowers bloom." "Spring it is," Jessie agreed, "though I don't want to wait to tell everyone." York chuckled. "Clara will be insufferable when she finds out she was right about us." Jessie laughed. "Let her be. She deserves the satisfaction." They spent the rest of the evening planning their future, how they would continue to run the trading post together, expand their work helping those in need, perhaps eventually build a larger home where they could raise a family. As the fire burned low, casting a warm glow over the cabin, Jessie felt a profound sense of peace. The journey that had begun with her father's death and brought her to Genoa had been difficult at times, but it had led her exactly where she was meant to be, in the arms of a man who valued her strength as much as her tenderness, who saw her as an equal partner in all things. "What are you thinking?" York asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. Jessie smiled up at him. "I'm thinking how grateful I am that I found you that day, burying Ranger beneath the tree." York's eyes softened with memory. "One of the worst days of my life became one of the best, because you appeared like some kind of miracle." He touched her cheek gently. "Ranger would have loved you, you know, almost as much as I do." "He'll still guard us from heaven," Jessie said, echoing York's words from that first meeting. York nodded, his eyes bright with emotion. "Yes, he will. Always." The news of their engagement spread quickly through Genoa. As predicted, Clara was triumphant, claiming her winnings from the town's informal betting pool with great satisfaction. But more touching were the genuine congratulations that poured in from all quarters: the miners who frequented the trading post, the ranchers who relied on their fair prices, the families they had helped both openly and secretly. Christmas Day arrived with fresh snow and bright sunshine. York and Jessie opened the trading post for a few hours in the morning, a tradition started by Jessie's father, offering free coffee and cookies to anyone who stopped by. Many did, bringing small gifts for the engaged couple and well wishes for their future. That afternoon, they closed early and attended the community celebration at the church, where their engagement was formally announced to applause and cheers. The simple fellowship, so different from the elaborate but often cold social gatherings of Philadelphia, warmed Jessie's heart. As winter gave way to spring, Jessie wrote regularly to her mother, detailing her happiness and plans for the future. To her surprise and delight, her mother's responses gradually became warmer, eventually culminating in a letter announcing her intention to travel to Genoa for the wedding. "Are you sure you're ready for that?" York asked when Jessie shared the news, his expression concerned. "Your mother in Genoa might be quite a shock for her and for us." Jessie smiled, appreciating his concern. "She'll adapt, and if she doesn't, it's only for a short visit." She traced the line of his jaw with her fingertips. "I want her to see why I'm so happy here, to understand the life I've chosen." The wedding was set for May, when the Sierra foothills would be carpeted with wildflowers. As the date approached, preparations absorbed much of their time outside the trading post's daily operations. The entire community seemed involved: women sewing decorations, men constructing a dance floor for the celebration, children gathering flowers for the church. A week before the wedding, Jessie's mother arrived on the stage from Carson City. Jessie Porter was every inch the Philadelphia society matron, from her perfectly arranged silver-streaked hair to her fashionable traveling costume. Her expression as she descended from the stage was one of carefully controlled dismay at her surroundings. "Mother," Jessie said, stepping forward to embrace her. "Welcome to Genoa." Elena returned the embrace somewhat stiffly. "Jessica, darling, you look, well. The Western air agrees with you, it seems." York stood respectfully nearby, hat in hand. Jessie turned to include him. "Mother, this is York Vance, my fiancé. York, my mother, Mrs. Jessie Porter." York stepped forward, offering a small bow that surprised Jessie with its polish. "Mrs. Porter, it's an honor to meet you. Jessie has told me so much about you." Alina assessed York with a critical eye that Jessie knew was taking in everything from his sun-weathered skin to his well-worn but clean clothing. "Mr. Vance, I understand you've been managing my late husband's business." "Yes, madam, for 5 years now, and alongside your daughter for the past 6 months." York's voice was respectful but confident. "William was a good man and a fair employer. I've tried to honor his legacy." Something in Alina's expression softened slightly at the mention of her late husband. "William always did have an eye for capable people." She looked around at the town. "Well, Jessica, perhaps you could show me to wherever I'll be staying. I'm quite fatigued from the journey." Jessie had arranged for her mother to stay in the best room at the Genoa house, recently renovated to accommodate visitors with more refined tastes. As they walked toward the hotel, Alina maintained a stream of observations about the town, most of them diplomatically phrased but clearly indicating her shock at the simplicity of life in Genoa. Over the next few days, Jessie divided her time between the trading post and her mother, showing Alina the life she had built. To her surprise, her mother seemed genuinely interested in the business aspects of the trading post, asking detailed questions about inventory, profit margins, and customer relationships. "Your father would be impressed," Alina admitted as they reviewed the ledgers one afternoon. "You've always had his head for figures." "Thank you, Mother," Jessie said, touched by the rare compliment. "That means a lot to me." Alina's gaze softened as she looked at her daughter. "I was wrong to try to bring you back to Philadelphia. I see that now. You found your place here, strange as it may seem to me." Jessie reached across the desk to squeeze her mother's hand. "It means everything that you came for the wedding." Alina smiled, a genuine smile that reminded Jessie of happier times from her childhood. "I wouldn't have missed it. Though I still think you could have found a suitable husband without traveling to the Nevada territory." Jessie laughed. "But then he wouldn't have been York, and he's the only one I want." The day before the wedding, Jessie closed the trading post early. York had a mysterious errand, so she took the opportunity to show her mother the oak tree where she had first met York. As they stood beneath its spreading branches, now adorned with fresh spring leaves, Jessie recounted the story of finding York burying his faithful dog. "He said he'll still guard us from heaven," Jessie told her mother. "It was the first thing that made me see beyond his rough exterior to the gentle heart beneath." Alina studied her daughter's face. "You truly love him." "With all my heart," Jessie confirmed. Alina nodded, seemingly coming to a decision. "Then I have something for you." From her reticule, she withdrew a small velvet box. "Your father wanted you to have this on your wedding day. I've been saving it, hoping you would eventually make a suitable match in Philadelphia. But I see now that suitable means something different than I thought." Jessie opened the box to find a pair of pearl earrings that had belonged to her grandmother. "Mother, they're beautiful," she breathed. "William gave them to me on our wedding day," Alina said softly. "Said they reminded him of tears of joy." She touched Jessie's cheek. "Your father would have approved of York, Jessica. He valued character above all else." Tears welled in Jessie's eyes. "Thank you for saying that and for being here." As they walked back to town, arm in arm, Jessie felt the final piece of her heart settle into place. She had her mother's blessing, the memory of her father's love, and tomorrow she would marry the man who had shown her what true partnership meant. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect. Wildflowers covered the hills around Genoa, and the air was fragrant with sage and pine. The small church was decorated with spring blossoms and ribbons, and it seemed the entire town had turned out for the occasion. Jessie wore a simple gown of ivory silk, adorned only with her grandmother's pearls and a crown of wildflowers in her dark hair. As she waited with her mother in the small room behind the church, Eleanor made a final adjustment to her veil. "You look beautiful, Jessica," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I wish your father could see you." "He's here in spirit," Jessie replied, touching the locket that hung around her neck, containing her father's portrait. The church doors opened, and Jessie entered on her mother's arm. The sight that greeted her took her breath away. York stood at the altar, dressed in a new black suit, his wheat gold hair neatly trimmed, his blue eyes fixed on her with such love that Jessie felt her heart might burst. As she reached his side, he took her hand, his touch steadying her as it always did. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promises of partnership, respect, and enduring love. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, York's kiss was both tender and passionate, a perfect balance that reflected their relationship. The celebration afterward lasted well into the night. Tables groaned with food contributed by every household in Genoa, and music from fiddles and guitars filled the air. York and Jessie danced beneath lanterns strung from tree branches, surrounded by friends who had become family. Even Eleanor seemed to enjoy herself, particularly when she discovered that several of the town's leading citizens were well-read and more cultured than their frontier setting might suggest. As the night drew to a close, York led Jessie away from the celebration toward a path she didn't recognize. "Where are we going?" she asked, curious. "One last surprise," he replied, a smile in his voice. The path led to a clearing just beyond the edge of town where a small cabin stood. Unlike York's existing cabin, this one was new, the wood still fresh and unstained, a lantern glowing welcomingly in the window. "York?" Jessie questioned, looking up at him. "Our home," he said simply. "If you like it. I've been building it for months with help from friends. Wanted it to be ready for tonight." Jessie walked forward in wonder, taking in the details: the sturdy porch with 2 rocking chairs, the carefully crafted door, the flower boxes waiting to be filled. Inside, she found a cozy living area with a stone fireplace, a kitchen with new cookware hanging on the wall, and a bedroom with a beautiful quilt-covered bed. "It's perfect," she whispered, turning to embrace her husband. "Absolutely perfect." York kissed her, his arms strong around her. "Welcome home, Mrs. Vance." Later, as they lay together in their new bed, the sounds of the celebration still faintly audible in the distance, Jessie rested her head on York's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Happy," he murmured, his fingers gently stroking her hair. "More than I ever imagined possible," she replied truthfully. "And you?" York tilted her chin up so he could look into her eyes. "The day I lost Ranger, I thought my heart might never heal, but then you appeared on that ridge like some kind of miracle, and everything changed." He kissed her softly. "You gave me back joy, Jessie. You gave me a future to look forward to." Jessie touched his face, memorizing the beloved features in the soft light of the bedside lamp. "And you showed me what it means to be truly valued, truly seen. We've given each other gifts beyond price." Outside their window, a shooting star streaked across the Nevada sky, a silent benediction on their union. Jessie smiled, remembering York's words from their first meeting. "Rangers watching over us," she whispered. York's arms tightened around her. "Always. From heaven." 5 years later, Jessie stood on the porch of their expanded home, watching York playing with their 3-year-old son, William, named for her father. Their daughter, Ellen, just a year old, sat on a blanket nearby, intently studying a colorful block. The trading post had thrived under their joint management, growing to include a second location in Carson City. Their work helping those in need had continued as well, though it had become less dangerous as laws were better enforced and attitudes slowly changed. Jessie's mother had visited twice more, eventually developing a grudging affection for Genoa and a genuine fondness for York. She had even considered moving west permanently, though in the end, the pull of Philadelphia society had proven too strong. As Jessie watched her family, her heart full of contentment, her gaze drifted to the oak tree on the hill, now visible from their porch. The stones marking Ranger's grave remained undisturbed, a permanent memorial to the faithful companion who had, in a way, brought her and York together. William let out a squeal of delight as York swung him high in the air, then set him gently on the ground. The boy immediately ran toward something at the edge of the yard, a small, brindled puppy, just old enough to be away from its mother. "Papa, look," William called, pointing excitedly. York knelt beside his son. "That's Ranger's grandson, remember, the one Mr. Jenkins said we could have when he was big enough." William approached the puppy carefully, his small hand extended as York had taught him. The puppy sniffed, then licked the boy's fingers, making William giggle with delight. Jessie descended the porch steps, lifting Ellen into her arms as she joined her husband and son. "Looks like he's ready to come home with us." York smiled up at her, the love in his eyes undimmed by the passing years. "What do you think we should call him, William?" The boy considered the question with all the seriousness a 3-year-old could muster. "Guardian," he declared finally. "Because he's going to protect us, like the angel dog in heaven." York's eyes met Jessie's over their son's head, sharing a moment of perfect understanding. The legacy of Ranger of love, loyalty, and protection would continue, just as their own love story would continue, growing deeper and richer with each passing year. "Guardian it is," York agreed, ruffling William's hair. "A perfect name for a very special dog." As the sun began to set over the mountains, casting long golden rays across their homestead, Jessie felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought her to this moment, for a father who had created an unexpected legacy, for a loyal dog who had guarded his master faithfully, and most of all, for the cowboy she had found beneath the oak tree, whose love had transformed her life in ways she could never have imagined. In the distance, the oak tree stood strong against the fading light, a sentinel watching over them all. And somewhere beyond, Ranger kept his eternal vigil, guarding them from heaven, just as York had promised on that fateful day when their story began.